All right, hello. Got time on my lunch break to do another one. So Numbers 11, like I said, after Numbers 10 kind of makes a shift over. Things, in my opinion, start getting more exciting. It's more stories. So, first one. Oh, recess going on outside, so if I hear kids and whistles. Now the people complained about their hardships. This is verse 1. So, let's go back. Numbers 10, we just finished, the silver trumpets and all this stuff, kind of what could be considered boring reading. And it starts off, Numbers 11. Now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord. Of course they did. Doesn't that sound, I'm not going to point and say it sounds like Israelites in the Old Testament constantly complaining, because we do that too. I'm not saying you or I specifically, but even people, we focus on the negative a lot too much. But you would think the people who are seeing all these miracles, like they have firsthand parting of the sea, plagues, fiery, even fire behind them, keeping the chariots away from Egypt. Everything they've seen, they're still seeing like a fiery cloud descend upon the tabernacle and the tent of meeting or whatever, and moving around, and they follow it. But they're still complaining. Like, that's ballsy to still be complaining. Like, what do you think that this God who clearly has powers beyond what you can imagine can't hear you? Isn't going to find out? But of course they complained. Now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord, and when he heard them, his anger was aroused, of course. Then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. When the people cried out to Moses, he prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So that place was called Taberah, because fire from the Lord had burned among them. I know people always say, like, the Old Testament God is so harsh, the New Testament God is, like, more loving. Don't forget, when Jesus comes back, he's going to be harsh again. He's going to separate the wheats and the tares. And I look at it much like, just think of you, or how you raise a child or anything. You have to start more strict, and you kind of ease up as responsibilities go on. And that's a society. Not that we're smarter than our ancestors, but we have the collective knowledge and experience. And I think that's kind of the way that it works, whether it's the micro or the macro, in your own personal life and being raised and going through teenager years, then adulthood and everything. And this is infancy of a civilization that's going to be God's holy people. And he's being strict with them at the beginning here, just as you would have to be. You have to be very strict with a child so they learn not to, like, play with outlets or cords or, no, you can't touch that because it's dangerous, sort of thing. And we don't really know, it just says, they complained. You're like, oh, that doesn't sound so bad. I complain sometimes. You don't know exactly what they're saying or what they're doing. Remember the Tower of Babel, and the stories about that is, the people said in their hearts that they were going to go to war with God. What are these people exactly saying? They could be literally cursing God and turning people away from God and trying to get them back to the worship of pagans and sacrifice and self-mutilation or whatever it might be. It's the Bible's just very to the point, what we can prove. Same with, we'll read it right later on, but what Elisha, I think, and the bear on the two children, hear that one again. You don't know what those two children were, who they were, and exactly what a child is. If they're a child, then they're innocent and they're spared, because the innocents are spared judgment. Now, if they are no longer at the age of innocence, you don't know exactly what those kids were doing. All we know is they're teasing Elisha for him being bald. We don't know what else they've done. God does. God knows what's in their heart. They could have been menacing in a terrible, think what teenage gangsters do now, terrible menacing way in their community with no remorse for it. And God was aware of it, and that was like the last straw. But that's the only thing that the Israelites who wrote the Bible could prove. They're not going to put stuff in there they can't prove. It's only the truth and what they can prove. That's why it's such a reliable source. I know there's a tangent, but so many people like, oh, the Old Testament God is different from the New Testament God. It's like saying your dad is a different person because he's not as strict with you at, 18 through 25 as he was with you, 7 through 12. Like, he's still, anyway. So they're complaining, they're whining. and fire burns them. Let's see what the commentary has to say here. Burns, I don't know if it burns them, burns the outskirts of the town. Their complaining made God displeased. Complaining hearts often displease God. Like, was it when Benjamin's always talking about gratitude and being grateful? Like, that's what his prayers are all about. And like no despair, no one's a victim. That's very important, super important. You want to really instill that early on in your children, just like you want to instill it early on in a civilization, a society, which is what God's starting here. We aren't told here exactly what Israel complained about. My point, it is possible that it simply came from a generally dissatisfied heart. Sometimes we complain not for any one great reason, but because our hearts are dissatisfied. The text, this is about the burning. The text does not make clear what was burnt on this occasion, whether it was just shrubs near the tents or some of the tents themselves. However, the people realized the danger they were in and appealed to Moses to pray for them. Either a supernatural fire was sent for this occasion, or the lightning was commissioned against them, or God smote them with one of those hot, suffocating winds that are very common in those countries. All right, let's move on. Verse 4, the rabble with them began to crave other food. So now, this is, again, they're complaining, fire comes down, they go to Moses to pray for them, or fire just burns the outskirts of the camp. They're going through more hardship. Moses prays after they beg him to God to, end this hardship. And then very next verse that we're getting to basically more complaining. The rabble with them began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and whining. If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt. Oh, it's so good. At no cost. Also the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and onions and garlic. Like, can't you just hear them whining? Like, dude, they killed a generation of our firstborn. We were slaves. We weren't allowed. Yeah, you're gonna have to work for your food now. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna, the manna being provided to you from God in the area that he's keeping you safe from all these people who would kill you. The manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it in a hand mill or crushed it on a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves, and it tasted like something made with olive oil. When the dew settled on the camp at night, the manna also came down. Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance of their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. Like, Moses, again, you can look at it from a secular, like maybe Moses is just like, either he's crazy or he's faking it to gain power, or he's legit. If he's crazy, he's pretty organized and efficient for being crazy. All these things can be made about the case for Jesus too. If he's just like power hungry and wanting to control his own group of people and make himself his own king, he chose the worst. Like, he's in the worst position because all they do is whine and complain and blame him and get mad at him, and it's not like he gets to be Genghis Khan with all these concubines or anything. He's not in a good position there. Or he's legit, and he has to be in the worst position ever. Like, the Israelites keep letting God down. God even offers earlier to make Moses the new line, like his seed, and wipe out the rest of these because these guys are doing an awful job. And Moses is like, no, they're fine. And they just keep being like, there's a famous little, like, I think they made into a Thug Life meme or something, or Reformed Thug Life. R.C. Sproul, a famous Presbyterian apologetics guy, and somebody asked him, like, I think the question was, if God is so loving and merciful and forgiving, why was his punishment for the first sin so great and severe and long-lasting? And he kind of starts, R.C. Sproul, starting off light, but he gets more extreme. He's like, severe. And this creature from the dirt, that's us, we're made from dirt, defied the most holy God. And instead of dying that day, like he was supposed to, he was clothed in the grace of God and was able to go on and live for hundreds of years, producing children so his lineage could carry out. And eventually, the seed of the woman would bring salvation back to man, even though they had sinned. And you think that it's too severe, like that? And he says that's the problem with Christians. We don't know who God is, and we don't know what we are. And I see that right here. It's just like, he's God. How are you even comprehending the ability to complain, especially while you're being provided manna after you've been freed from slavery and infanticide? Moses heard the people of Eritrea. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord, "Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me?" What did I just say? He's like, why did I conceive all these people? Like, they're not even mine. They're not my seed. Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms, as a nurse carries an infant, to the land you promised an oath to their ancestors? Like, he doesn't even fully relate to them, probably, because, again, he was raised as an Egyptian. If you go back to those episodes of mine from Exodus, early Exodus, I'm sure he was like many multiracial children or adopted children. It was like a dual pole, never totally being accepted in one class and never totally being accepted in the other. Very much probably felt like an outsider in a lot of ways. You know, there's people who, because of the Charlton Heston movie, would think that the Egyptians didn't know that Moses was a Hebrew. Yeah, they knew. That's just dumb. Like, it was, of course they knew. He's like, why? Why do I have to put up with these people? Where can I, did I conceive all of them? Did I give birth? You promised their ancestors, and I'm here taking care of them. Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, "Give us meat to eat." I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me, if I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. Like, he's at his wit's end. You know, it's too bad Moses, with the whole smiting of the rock thing, not being allowed into the promised land, but I think Moses is just ready to go. He's like, I'm tired. I think all Moses really wanted to do probably was stay at Jethro's place, take care of some sheep, raise his family, and he's called to do a greater thing. But he's complaining. He's complaining about all the complaining that's coming to him. The Lord said to Moses, "Bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting, that they may stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them. They will share the burden of the people with you, so that you will not have to carry it alone. Tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow, when you will eat meat. The Lord heard you, and you wailed, 'If only we had meat to eat. We were better off in Egypt.' Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it. You will not eat for just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5, 10, or 20 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it, because you have rejected the Lord, who is among you, and have wailed before him, saying, 'Why did we ever leave Egypt?'" Careful what you ask for, sort of thing. But Moses said, "Here I am among 600,000 men on foot, and you say, 'I will give them meat to eat for a whole month'? Would they have enough if flocks and herds were slaughtered for them? Would they have enough if all the fish in the sea were caught for them?" The Lord answered Moses, "Is the Lord's arm too short?" Again, we don't know who God is, and we don't know who we are. Now you will see whether or not what I say will come true for you. So Moses, that's just a cool conversation. You notice Moses does go back and forth with God, going all the way back to the burning bush, where he's like, "I can't speak very well, blah, blah, blah." And Moses, or God's like, "Who put the tongue in your mouth, and who gives you the words to speak?" Again, And it's okay, I think, for us to wrestle with God, with understanding and trying to figure out what's going on. At the end of the day, you have to be willing to listen when you feel your conscience pulling you a certain way, when you feel God pulling you a certain way. But it's just an interesting conversation. He's like, all right, you want meat? I'm going to give you guys so much meat, you're going to get bored of it again. And you're going to see that it's not the meat. If only we had meat. I'll give you so much, and you'll get tired of it, and then you'll complain again. He's trying to show them, trying to teach them a lesson. And Moses is like, how are you going to provide meat for a month? And God's like, is my arm too short? I'm God. What do you think? So Moses went out and told the people what the Lord had said. He brought together 70 of the elders and had them stand around the tent. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke with him, and he took some of the power of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. When the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but did not do so again. However, 2 men whose names were Eldad and Medad had remained in the camp. They were listed among the elders, but did not go out to the tent. Yet the Spirit also rested on them, and they prophesied in the camp. A young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Joshua, son of Nun, who had been Moses' aide since youth, spoke up and said, Moses, my lord, stop them. But Moses replied, are you jealous for my sake? I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. What Christ was able to do. The foreshadowing. Then Moses and the elders of Israel returned to the camp. That's what the Pentecost is, you know. Now a wind went out from the Lord and drove quail in from the sea. It scattered them up to 2 cubits deep all around the camp, as far as a day's walk in any direction. All that day and night and all the next day the people went out and gathered quail. No one gathered less than 10 homers, when they spread them out all around the camp. But while the meat was still between their teeth and before it could be consumed, the anger of the Lord burned against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. Therefore the place was named Kibroth Hattaavah, which means graves of craving, because they buried the people who had craved other food. From Kibroth Hattaavah, the people traveled to Hazeroth and stayed there. Okay, so the ending there, basically what happened is right away, there were some people who still like, oh, this is the meat we get, ugh. So, because it says at the end, all right, they spread them out and it was all over the camp, but while the meat was still between their teeth and before it could be answered, the anger of the Lord burned against the people, and he struck them with a plague. The very next sentence, and you're like, why did he get angry at him? Therefore the place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, which means graves of craving, which are craving, because they buried the people who had craved other food. So even though they whined about not having meat, they're given meat, they're now eating the meat, there's still a bunch of people like, yeah, why isn't it beef though? Quail, that's the worst. I prefer fish. Yeah, this is just awful. And God's like, you're the worst. I mean, again, we all have that tendency in us, but you have to know that it's wrong. And I think we're all kind of guilty of it. And again, God knows our heart, so don't be too harsh on yourself, but think about how much just day to day, talking with your coworkers, talking with somebody who's not like a close friend, but just the everyday conversations you have, how much of it's associated around something negative or something that's a complaint or how awful this is or isn't annoying that and these sort of things. And remember what communion is, what the offering table and everything, that God's looking for people to commune with. He wants people that will hang out with his son, whom everything was created for. He wants us to be worthy to. So is that the person that's worthy to sit with the Son of God? Is that the person who's worthy to be in the house of God? Is someone who's going to complain no matter what? Always going to have something negative to say? So it's something to be aware of. And again, it's in your heart. I think a lot of us do that out of habit. We complain out of habit, and we don't actually have like a a despair or a negative heart. It's just those conversation things. It's kind of the way that society's gone. But it's something to be aware of, because that will start taking hold of your mind if you do it too much. Anyway, Israelites complain a lot. They complain a lot. We all complain a lot, but they do it in their hearts a lot, and God knows their hearts, and he gets annoyed with it. I don't believe that makes him different than the New Testament God. There are people who do, and that's fine, whatever, but I don't think so. I think, to me, it makes perfect sense. And I know that Christ comes to forgive. But again, people often forget. He says, he was without sin, cast the first stone, all these things, but he also tells everybody, sin and rise no more. He's showing that, you can't just be like, oh, this person did this sin, they're awful. You have to give them a redemption arc. Now, if they keep failing that redemption arc, then it's something different. But you can't have a kingdom of heaven with people who have genuine despair, negativity in their heart. That has to be dispelled. You have to purify yourself, which is what we see all throughout the Old Testament. You have to try to cleanse yourself of that negativity. Now, there's nothing wrong with seeing the negative, being aware of the negative, but always being grateful. Being grateful is the key to the heaven, to having that connection to God. You can't really have the connection to God. You can't follow the way without gratitude. And people might be like, Christ is the only way to God. Okay, I'm a Christian, I believe that, but what about Christ? Didn't Christ tell us to be grateful? I mean, the Lord's Prayer, the template of how to say a prayer, first you acknowledge that God is holy. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. You acknowledge his will is going to be done. On earth as is in heaven, give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins. So what do you ask for? Your daily bread, and for your sins to be forgiven? I mean, that's not a complaining person. That's a grateful person. If you are ungrateful, you're going to be asking for much more than that. Anyway, everyone have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or good night. God bless.